Alright guys, it's hard to see everything here. It's hard to fit it all in frame. But today we are going over my complete survival or personal survival setup or loadout, and we're going to be going over it in detail. Talking about every little bit of it, finally breaking down in a true video every piece. And I've been wanting to do this for a little while, and now we're doing it. So let's jump into first the tools, and then we'll get into the PSK. A little bit of a prologue before we jump into this. When I do videos on my PSK or personal survival kit, I always get questions of why isn't there any saws, knives, why aren't there dedicated, containers, even though there are some in here anyways, why isn't this more robust? And the whole reason why is that this PSK was never designed to be a complete fail-safe to have all tools or all the tools needed, and that's primarily because I didn't want to create a kit that merely checked boxes, that merely was like, well, there is a piece of cutlery in there, there is a container, there is a shelter, where I wanted truly robust things that I felt I could personally use to good effect in a real survival situation. And for those types of reasons, I didn't feel like you could put any form of knife or saw in this kit itself that would perform to an adequate or reasonable level. However, I still wanted to make this PSK a very man-portable, very well-rounded kit. So, like I said, later in the video, we'll talk about this kit as a whole and break down the kind of mindset to everything in it. But for now, we're going to talk about the core tools that build this kit. So these are the things that survival kit will not have in it, because these are simply better tools. So first off, let's go over the gun. So the gun, as was kind of out of frame, is a Smith & Wesson Model 29, and this is just my go-to outdoor wilderness handgun. It is pretty overall good for a wide variety of tasks, primarily self-defense, but you could certainly rip down the rounds and use the powder to start fires, and of course many other things. So that is the handgun itself, and then I carry a little 18 round kind of slip carry case, and it just has, of course, bear defense loads in it. So I will usually carry six rounds in the gun, and then another 18 right there. So that is the firearm. That is the firearm and the firearm setup. Now let's talk about some other pieces. So the next one up is the container, and this is how I have the container set up. This is a Maxpedition. I'm blanking on the name of this case, but it is a Maxpedition, and then in here we have the Vargo titanium bot, and then I have it set up with its little wire hanger so that I can hang it in over a fire and boil water or make tea, do whatever. But the titanium bot is and has been my go-to survival kind of water bottle, because it is incredibly lightweight, and of course, it being a bot, it is a bottle and a pot. So this is a screw down lid that you can use to hold water in a watertight fashion, or you can use it in a pot type of fashion by flipping this lid and cooking with it, once again doing teas and stuff like that. So this is a bot. It's the most versatile, lightweight piece of container that I've ever found, and that's why I continue to go back to it and use it heavily. Alright, so the last three up are the core, or kind of what I would consider almost my holy trinity to cutlery. So first off, at the core, we have the hatchet. Now the hatchet is probably one of my favorite tools because it is one of the most versatile pieces of kit. It is capable of doing a wide plethora of different tasks, and for me, the hatchet is probably one of the most important tools, especially something like this GBA wildlife hatchet, and that is because it is not only very compact and very man-portable, but also you can use this thing to build shelters, to process game animals, to start fires. There's just about anything you need to do in the wilderness can be done with this hatchet. Now the reason why I have the knife and the saw is because there are some tasks that can be done more efficiently and a little bit better with each of those tools. But at the core, a hatchet like this is going to be able to do everything that saw and that knife can do. Once again, not well, but it can do them, on top of being a hatchet itself and having its own unique benefits. All right, next one up is the saw, and the saw for this case is a Silky Gone Boy, and the Silky Gone Boy for me is probably one of the hardest to beat pocket folding saws, because this is a saw that you can fit in a cargo pocket, but as you can see when you fold it out, you get a really nice long blade, and this thing does work. It puts in the work, especially this curved blade. It really works very well at processing even up to medium wood, but especially small wood if you're looking at, you know, trying to sustain a fire overnight. If you're looking to try to build a shelter, this thing is amazing for those applications. All right, last one up is the knife, and this is a pretty basic setup here. This is, and I do have quite a few knives to go for. I would either go for my Chris Reeve Knives Pacific, or I'd probably go for my Bark River Knives Bushcrafter or Bravo 1. Now this is my Bravo 1 in specific, but like I said, I have multiple different knives to choose from, all of them realistically about comparable. I do really like this Bravo 1. Ultimately though, I'm just looking for a knife that has a good blade, good thick steel that can be used in an industrial wilderness application, that can strike ferro rods off of its spine, and that will hold up to the rigors of just being a knife. Now also too, I'm looking for a knife that has a fine enough and sharp enough edge that it can do game processing and fine kind of carving tasks, if you will, more crafty camp tasks. And that's primarily because a lot of the more industrious and heavy applications outside of batoning will be handled by my hatchet. All right, so those are the core tools. Now let's go over to the PSK. All right, so this is my PSK, or personal survival kit. Once again, kind of operating with the philosophy that everything previously mentioned, as far as the knife, hatchet, firearm, saw, all of those things are included. I don't leave home, or I don't go on the trail without those tools in addition to this. This is essentially complementary to those tools. Those tools are complementary to this kit. So it's important to know that there's a very symbiotic relationship here, that they are related. So with that out of the way, starting with the outside of this kit, we have first my ACR Rescue Link, and this is a personal locator beacon. Now what really surprises me is a lot of people have given me flack and or don't carry PLBs themselves, but I think if you spend any time, whether professionally or unprofessionally or like amateur, in the wilderness, and you don't have a personal locator beacon, you're really doing yourself a disservice. Now, I'm not going to say if you go outdoors once every 2 or 3 years, you should have one. But if you regularly, like once a month or more, go out into the wilderness, like deep into the wilderness, not just your park down the street, it really serves you, or will serve you very well, to have a PLB, or personal locator beacon. Now, mine just so happens to be an ACR Rescue Link. There are other brands out there like Spot, Garmin. Many people make PLBs, but make sure that you get one. Like I said, especially living in Alaska, it is so incredibly important, because there is such a large area of wilderness that if they don't know even where exactly you are, it can be hard to track you down. Even if they know like a rough generalized area of where you were supposed to be, having the PLB will really narrow that down. It'll also come into play very well if, for whatever reason, say you're canoeing or you are off from the point that you said that you were going to be. Search and rescue is going to be looking in that generalized area. So if you are not in that area, having that PLB will help point them in the right direction. All right, so next one up is the little first aid kit of this kit. So in this little pouch here, or this little slip, is where this guy lives. And while it is a bit of a bugger to remove, this is just a simple first aid kit. Now there's nothing amazing in here specifically, but essentially what I've included in here are a number of things like Tylenol for just general pain relief. There's also some Benadryl back here for for allergic reactions or antihistamines. And then there's also things like Afterbite, which is a topical like anesthetic for pain relief. And then there's some plastic bags, some gauze, some different things like that. Once again, there's nothing crazy in here. You can't really fit anything super crazy in a tiny Altoids tin, but it carries some basics and some essentials that will just help you out in a pinch. And while there isn't anything spectacular in this little Altoids tin, I think a lot of people kind of underwrite the value of psychological safety or well-being. And what I mean by this is, say you get stung by a bee, if you are already lost or you're already outdoors, the stress of that can impact you negatively on your decision making and critical thinking skills. So while I'm not saying that you should cater to every whim and fancy, having things like Benadryl may not have a clear or tangible benefit as far as like its importance to keeping you alive. Depending on how allergic you are, it might actually help keep you alive. But if nothing else, even if it isn't a kind of life or death thing, being able to be in the right headspace in the wilderness, in survival situations, can truly make or break a situation. So it is definitely handy, and I don't underwrite psychological health for that type of situation. All right, so now let's dig into this guy. This is the meat and potatoes of this PSK, and I want to do this on camera so people truly will see, because I get a lot of comments saying like, wow, you really fit all of that into here. And yes, I really fit a lot of stuff into here. So let's pull it all out one by one. Alright, so first up is paracord. This stuff is pretty self-explanatory. It's cordage. It's about 6 feet of paracord, of course, with the inner strands still intact, so you could pull those out. But this is just paracord. This is probably honestly my most used piece of this kit, because sometimes I actually end up using this and then of course promptly replacing it in non-emergent survival situations. So paracord, pretty self-explanatory, pretty important. Now the next one up is going to be, I have several of these kind of multi-system formats that I'll show you, but this is the first of them, and this is essentially one of my Mylar blankets. There are two in here, but this is my lighter duty Mylar blanket, and I have it wrapped with rubber bands, and then on the inside I have my ferrocerium rod right here, which can be drawn out if I need it, and then I have my lighter here on this side, which once again can be drawn out if I need it. So both of these guys easily accessible, and of course I have lanyards on them so that if I need to find them in a pinch, I can grab them. And usually I will leave this lanyard hanging outside of my pouch, so that even if my PSK is closed and I need my ferro rod, I can actually just draw it straight out of the kit. So I'll usually do that, but this is how it is kind of set up. Once again, rubber bands are useful for survival. The Mylar blanket is useful for survival. I want to note too, I do make sure that this one continues to stay in good condition. If it's damaged, I replace it. But this is my secondary Mylar blanket, so this is not my contingent one. This is just a backup, and also a nice Mylar blanket, because I did some testing a few years ago, and Mylar blankets are usually pretty darn small, so having a couple of them is very handy for trying to make a shelter or cover yourself. So anyways, that is the Mylar blanket, lighter, and ferro rod. Now next up is going to be water purification tablets. We'll get into this in a little bit, but there are 4 condoms in here, and once again people ask, primarily I think for the jokes of it more than anything, of why do I have 4 condoms. It's because each condom you can fill with about 1 liter of water, so that's 4 liters of water, just a pretty good amount. It's about 1 gallon. It's I think a little bit less than 1 gallon, but it's about 1 gallon of water. So that's pretty handy to have, and I pair those condoms with this aqua tab, or portable aqua in this case. These are just iodine tablets that you can use for water purification. Now next up is going to be the last fire starting method, and there are tinders in here, but I have 3 specific fire starting methods: the ferro rod, the lighter, and then matches. Alright, so like I was saying, this is the 3rd of the fire starting methods, and most importantly in here I keep the matches, like I said, but I also keep a little bit of But I also keep a little bit of steel wool in here, and the primary reason why that is to use with batteries that I likely have around. Don't necessarily have any batteries, obviously, in this kit, but if there are batteries like in any of my devices around me, I can use those batteries to also start a fire. So once again, I'm not considering that an official like fire starting method of this kit, but it is there because it's one way to fill up dead space with something that's actually pretty useful. So anyways, the last thing in the middle of this container is going to be my other kind of setup or system. And essentially what this is once again, we have another 3 rubber bands, and then on top of that we have this cotton bandana, which can be used for a wide variety of different tasks. And then I have the main Mylar blanket in here, and I keep the main Mylar blanket, the one that I trust the most, in here protected with this bandana so that it doesn't get cut or damaged or anything like that. It also sits at the bottom of the kit, so it is less likely to come into contact with anything else that might try to hurt it. It's also worth mentioning I have some tripwire in here, or very, very light gauge steel wire in this kit or in the main compartment as well. This stuff, once again, good for making snares, good for doing a whole bunch of different tasks, and it can be used for things like baling wire because it is metal, so it's non-flammable. So that is the core of the center unit in this kit. Now let's talk about the front-facing side of it, and this is going to be food and water. So like I said, the aforementioned condoms are in here. There are 4 of them. They are just non-lubricated condoms, nothing too fancy there. Then I have a couple, or like 4 instant coffees of varying varieties, and these are just really more for caffeine kind of replacement or supplementation. You can take instant coffee, put it in your mouth immediately, or once again you can use it with the water that you collect from the condoms and or the bot that was mentioned earlier. So you can use it in a variety of ways. Then I have 2 very well formed and partly crushed Cliff Bars, and these guys are just generic. And the reason why I carry the Cliff Bars, this is another thing that kind of branches off more into the psychological effect, I guess. Also the caffeine does as well, but really this is just more for kind of meal supplementation. Obviously this isn't the type of stuff that you can live off of, but if you're out for a short period of time, like say 72 hours, having something like Cliff Bars are going to keep you less focused or less occupied on the feelings of hunger than if. And so with the food out of the way, I also carry a little chunk of aluminum foil. So this is for just creating into any bowls or containers that are needed. So once again, this kit does actually have a fairly robust container system between things like the condoms, the aforementioned different plastic bags, and the aluminum foil. So there are a few different ways of carrying stuff what this kit contains. Okay, now moving over to the back side of this kit, and this holds a few goodies. So the first one up is going to be, this is kind of one of my fire starters, but I really consider this more a tinder than anything. And these are storm matches, or I believe they're actually USC Titan matches, if I remember correctly now. And essentially I got this little plastic bag that once again you can put stuff in. It has another rubber band over it. You guys see a real trend there. And then of course there are Titan matches in here. Now some of them are broken, unfortunately, due to the tight compression of this kit, but most of them are intact and not cracked at all, so that's a plus. And then of course I have the strike face for it right here. Of course it is separated in its own little plastic bag. That's kind of hard to see here, but yeah, so there's no contact between the strike face and these matches. But these matches are Titan matches, and they themselves are kind of almost a fire starter slash tinder in and of themselves. They burn for a very long time. They're very large matches, and yeah, they are crazy cool. Really do like them. So there's that. I also have a whistle in here for signaling. This is kind of unrelated to fire, but it's just nice to have for signaling. Then I also have lots and lots of tinder quicks. As you can see here, I have lots of tinder quicks and lots of UST wet fires. And essentially those are really to serve the core of the tinder prep. Now, I do have another kind of backup tinder prep, and that is the live fire. Now, live fires are not my favorite thing. I have used them in the past. I've even used this one a little bit, but the primary reason why I field the live fire for this is as a kind of last ditch if I need to get a fire started and the items I'm working with or the tinder that I'm working with is compromised. Either it's wet, either it's snowy or icy, and I need to get it to start. And so essentially the beauty of live fire is this is, assuming that it is dry, this can be used and you can, start a fire with it, say dole it out to about here, have a fire running, and you can use this as a prolonged kind of in between tinder. So this can light something on fire, then you can close this off and use it again. So I kind of use this in place of things like matches or something like a lighter, where I can light this on fire with a lighter, matches, or ferro rod, and then use this to light something that may not be as broken down or conducive to starting a fire. So yeah, like I said, back of here, you just got a whole bunch of tinder quicks, wet fires, and all of that fun stuff in there. So that's essentially the back of this survival kit. So as you can see, there isn't a crazy high amount of stuff in here, but there is more than you might think. And ultimately, this, like looking at this condensed, this is a pretty darn good amount of stuff that I've learned from my experience to, I think, help me with survival. And once again, this whole kit is kind of tailored towards like a 72-hour survival situation. If you had to stay anywhere for 72 hours, this is going to go a long way in helping you. Now, of course, this is not going to be the perfect end-all to beat-all kit. And I think it's important to note that, I've talked in a lot of other survival videos about, how you should dress appropriately for your situation, how you should carry the right gear. And so a lot of this ends up being that, if you were, say, dropped outside at -40, today, if you were dropped outside at -40 today, could you just survive with just this kit? There's a lot of other questions you have to ask yourself, like, are you dressed appropriately? Do you have other means of shelter? Could you field all of this and make this all work to survive 72 hours at -40? Potentially, but once again, it has to predicate off of the fact of you having the appropriate clothing and not doing things to compromise yourself. Once again, if you become wet due to exposure to water, this kit isn't going to be a fix-all, right? This isn't going to fix every problem, but assuming you're dressed accordingly, assuming you have the reasonable gear that you need to have for the conditions, place, environment, and temperatures, you're going to survive with this kit. And once again, this kit is going to go a long way in helping that or facilitating that. And at the core, you have more than just the 5 C's of survivability, I think, in a very practical way. And so for me, this is a kit that has been many years in the making, and I've only just really now come to the point where I think, come to the stopping point for me personally, where I think I have all of this kit all in this kit that I want to have. And I think that realistically, breaking it down, I don't really know if there's anything that I could add or take away that I would want to do. And there are a lot of really good solutions and really good, suggestions out there. And certainly in the comments, I think I'm going to get lots of comments about what I could be doing better. And I always welcome it. Personally, I see it as, a chance to improve. So I welcome the comments and suggestions, but this is overall pretty much, in my opinion, how to make a really sturdy, really reliable survival kit that covers all of your bases. So anyways, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. And as you can see, I'm starting to pack it all back up because there is a lot to pack up in this kit. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the video, guys. And as always, God bless, and I'm out.